Hi and welcome to this tutorial. The previous tutorial was about introduction to annotations, and we saw a simple annotation called required, which allows us to specify which dependencies are actually required. Well, that annotation is actually not helping us to do any dependency wiring. In this tutorial, we're going to look at one annotation which helps us actually wire dependencies the same way we are doing in the Spring XML by specifying all these properties. The annotation that we're going to talk about is called Autowired, and what we do is, in order to wire any dependency, we specify the @autowired annotation in order to let Spring autowire the dependency into the required member variable. This is similar to the autowiring that we've seen in our earlier tutorial. We used to autowire by name, we could autowire by type. This autowiring is actually autowiring by type. But then, if you remember, we saw that autowiring by type is sometimes ambiguous. It depends on what beans we have specified and what types of beans we have specified in the Spring XML. However, the @autowired has a few other tricks up its sleeve, and we can make it less ambiguous, and we can configure what beans get actually injected. So we'll have a look at that. First, let me remove the required annotation and the required bean post processor that I've defined over here. I'm just going to comment this out and save this. Now what I would normally do is I would have a property and then define a dependency for the center member variable. But instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an annotation provide this dependency. So here on the setter, I'm going to use the annotation @autowired, and I will import this again from Beans factory annotation, same as earlier. Okay, so I have, let me remove the earlier import as well, and we can save this. So this is all that I need to do in my class in order to make this autowired. Now in my Spring XML, what's going to happen is, now again, I don't have to specify a property here because that dependency wiring information is specified using this annotation. Now let me first remove the other point objects. I'll just leave the point object that I want the wiring to happen. So I'll just comment this out, and I'll also comment the triangle, and I'll save this. So right now what's happening is very simple. We just have a circle bean and we have a point bean, and now I have made the point member variable of the circle bean as autowired. So it's very straightforward for Spring to know that this is actually the bean that needs to be autowired. I've commented pretty much everything else. Now again, just like our required annotation, autowired annotation is also a post processor. So there is a post processor that we need to define in the Spring XML that's going to look for the @autowired annotation in all the Spring beans, and it's going to do the autowiring. And we'll have a look at that post processor here. Again, we go to the beans jar, and in the factory annotation package, here you see Autowired annotation bean post processor. So this is the post processor that's going to do the work. So let's declare that. Let's add the comment here. I'm going to call this Autowired annotation bean post processor. Let me save this. Okay, so it's simple. I just have declared the Autowire annotation bean post processor, and in my circle class I have made this center member variable as autowired, and I have supplied a bean in the XML which matches that type. So I have a point bean, so Spring knows that that's what needs to be autowired. So when I run this, when I'm doing a get bean of circle and I'm doing the draw, it should print the point A as 0, 0, which is fine. It's working fine. Now, here's a trick. Now, what happens if I uncomment this? Now, let's say I make multiple beans of the same type made available here. So I have 3 beans. I have point A, point B, and point C, and I have made this point member variable autowired by type. Now what's Spring gonna do? Now let me save and run this. So here you can see it's gonna get an exception. Okay, and the exception is error creating bean with name circle and injection of autowired dependencies failed. Okay, so it is not able to find out which bean needs to be injected. We'll look at the details of this a bit later, but here's what I'm going to do now. Instead of calling these point A, point B, and point C, what I'm going to do is point A is the bean that I'm concerned about. I want this bean to be injected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the point A bean name to be center. So let me change this as center, and I will save this. So what I'm doing is the bean that I want to be autowired, I'm just changing the name, and I have a few other beans of the same type, but obviously with different names. Now let's have a look at what Spring does. So if I run this, here you can see it's actually pulling up 0, 0, even though there are multiple beans of the same type. So here's what's happening. Autowired annotation first looks for type, and if it finds that there is only one bean of that type, which is the point type, even though the name is different, it's going to autowire it because, hey, it's just one bean. Now if there are multiple beans of the same type, what Spring is going to do is, what the autowired annotation is going to do is, as a second step, it's going to see if there are any names that match. So first it's going to look for type, and it finds multiple beans of the same type. So that's not going to help now. Now the second thing that it's going to do is it's going to look for the name of the bean if it matches the name of the member variable. And then if that matches, then it's going to assign that bean, and then it's going to proceed with the execution. So it's actually doing some intelligent guesswork here. Not really guesswork, but it's intelligently looking at multiple things. First, it's going to look for type. There's just one bean, fine, it's going to assign it. And if it does not find, if it finds multiple beans of the same type, then it's going to look for clues in the bean name. And then if it finds the bean name, then it's going to assign it. Now let me change this back, and I will show you one other way in which we can give clues to this autowired annotation to help it isolate to a particular dependency. Now let's say I cannot change the name of this bean. Say I'm using this for multiple other objects and I cannot change the name. Let's say the triangle was also here and I was using point A. Obviously I cannot change this and then have it autowired by name. I would have to define different beans with different names so that it can autowire based on name. So there is another strategy that we can use to solve this problem. Okay, I have multiple beans of the same type and I cannot change the bean name. Now how do I give clues for Spring to autowire this? I can use something called as a qualifier. Now I can use a @qualifier, and I can specify a qualifier name. Now what is a qualifier? A qualifier is something that I can mention in the bean definition to say that this bean is actually a circle related bean. Okay, now how I do that is, over here in the bean definition, I use a qualifier tag, and then I say value equals, let's say I call this circle related. Okay, I'm qualifying this bean to be a circle related bean. Okay, and now here I'm going to say qualifier is circle related. Okay, now I will have to do the import of this qualifier. Again, this is from factory annotation. Now what Spring is going to do is it's going to check for autowired, and it's going to look at all the beans that belong to the same type. Now it finds that, hey, there are multiple beans of the same type. Then it's going to look for name. It's going to see if any of the beans have the name as center and of the point type. It finds no such bean. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to look for the qualifier. It's going to look for any of those beans which have a qualifier that matches the qualifier that we have defined over here, which is circle related. It finds that only one bean among these three has the qualifier circle related, and there you go. It finds the bean and then it assigns it to the center. Now, if I save this, I'm going to save this as well. And if I run this, here you see you get an XML error. It says qualifier must be declared. Now what's happening is I have not mentioned all the XML namespaces over here. So far this was working fine. It was just bean, but I'm going to add the XML namespaces, the complete list of XML namespaces, because it's going to be handy in the future. If you have been following along, you will want to add that in your XML as well. So what you do is go to Spring Framework, and in the projects, search for some config.xml. Okay, I have the annotation config.xml. I'm going to copy this bean tag over here. Here you can see it has all the XML namespaces configured, and this is going to come in handy. So I'm going to copy this and paste it over here. And then, of course, I will have to remove the doc type here and say save. So since all these namespaces are configured, you can use the qualifier over here, and it's also handy because of a few other XML elements that we're going to add in the future. If you have been following along, make sure you make this change in your Spring XML as well. Okay, so now we are all set to run. Now if we run this, here you can see it's picked up 00 again. Now why has it picked up 00? Because even though there are multiple beans of the same type, there's only one which has the qualifier, and then that is what I have added over here as a qualifier, so that's what it picks up. So again, Autowired is a handy feature. You can wire beans depending on type and also depending on name, because that's the second guess that it's going to make. If it finds multiple beans of the same type, it's going to look for a name, and the other clue that we can provide is the qualifier. If you have multiple beans of the same type, again, it's going to look for a bean which has the qualifier that you've put over here, and then if it finds a bean with the same qualifier, it's going to assign this. So again, this is the Autowired annotation, which is behind the scenes the required annotation, the Autowired annotation bean post processor that's doing all this work for us. Now, since we've added these namespaces, there's actually a tag which helps us with all these post processors. So here we added the required bean post processor for the required annotation. We added the Autowired annotation bean post processor for the Autowired annotation. Now there is actually a shortcut which helps us define all these different post processors which are all related to annotations. Now instead of defining each and every one of these, what I can do is, if you see here, you have an annotation config tag over here. So this is actually a shortcut for defining all these annotation bean post processor tags. So I can just add this one instead of adding each and every bean post processor over here related to annotations, and this is going to take care of initializing all those bean post processors. So now this is going to work even though we have not defined the bean post processor. There you go. The annotations are working, and this is again a handy shortcut for defining all the annotation related bean post processor configuration. You don't have to define all of them one by one. Just add this and you're done. You can add any number of annotations to your beans.